Alright, so when you're cutting characters from Smash, there's essentially two ways to go about it. You could either look at the characters as they currently are in Smash and evaluate whether or not they should stay, or you can look at the merits of them being added to Smash in the first place, only looking at their significance within their home games and how they balance out the representation in the Smash Bros. Roster. We're going to be going with that second approach, totally ignoring originality or history within Smash Bros. Itself, and only looking at their home franchises. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, why are we cutting characters in the first place? And, shut up. Right off the bat, we've got our core 12 characters from Smash 64. And while they're all historically significant to Smash Bros. Itself, I'd argue that they shouldn't all be here. Most of the 12 are safe, but Jigglypuff has gotta go. I get that she was a fan favorite in the anime, but when she's up against Pikachu, the difference in their relevance is pretty apparent. She was fun for the time, but right now she does not need to be here. I also want to talk about two other characters here. Captain Falcon and the Echo of Samus, Dark Samus. Starting with the Cap. His games did decently at the time, but Nintendo seemingly forgot about the franchise entirely. I ultimately decided on keeping him though, as he's our last tie to one of Nintendo's only non-Mario Kart racing games, which I think is significant. Secondly, we have Dark Samus. While her current implementation in Smash may seem like a full character who's just a copy of Samus, I'd argue that she's a great representation of 3D Metroid, repping the Metroid Prime series. Metroid going into the third dimension was a pretty big step for the series, and I think that should be honored in our roster. Going down the list of fighters, our next cut is gonna have to be Daisy. While I feel like she could be argued to represent the Mario Sports series, I also feel like there's ways to integrate that into the movesets of other characters from the Mario franchise without needing to fill up an entire character slot. This brings us to our next cut, which is the Ice Climbers. And holy crap, out of everyone on my list, they just don't make any sense to be here. Ice Climber didn't sell all that well, and it was basically outdone on everything it did by Duck Hunt. It has almost no cultural impact outside of the notoriety that came from Smash Bros. And the game itself is like you took the early Castlevania games and then removed everything except the clunky jumping and then made an entire game around that. The gameplay just makes me want to drop games altogether. And while they do represent the arcade days of retro Nintendo, there's just so many other great retro reps that are a lot more deserving of a slot and actually have significance for Nintendo. For example, Excite Biker, who I know was thought about and then dropped for being too difficult to implement, but after 2 decades of designing Smash characters, I'm confident that Sakurai would be able to pull this off. But that's another topic for another time. Anyway, the Ice Climbers were the easiest cut for me on this entire list. Next up, we're keeping Zelda and Sheik, especially to get that sweet Ocarina of Time representation. But we're gonna cut Young Link. I feel as though he doesn't differentiate himself enough as a character from other versions of Link. And I know I said I wouldn't discuss movesets, but dang, is it a missed opportunity that we didn't get to see his masks in his gameplay. Likewise, Dr. Mario and Pichu are also on the chopping block, as I really don't see either of them as being able to justify their inclusion in the game. Although the Pichu Bros anime that played in Pokemon Channel on the GameCube will always have a special place in my heart. Falco is also being removed from our roster. The biggest reason is, even though Star Fox 64 was huge and the franchise isn't totally dead, I feel like he just struggles to differentiate himself enough from Fox as a character. While his personality is unique, the way they fight is just so similar. The real reason though is because we've got to make way for the god of the Star Fox universe, Slippy Toad. I mean, people hate on him, but holy crap is this guy crazy. Remember that time that Fox got locked up in dinosaur jail and then in about 10 seconds, Slippy was like, "Don't worry, Fox, I've wirelessly sent you the ability to turn into a dinosaur so that you can sneak out of jail unnoticed." And then Fox could just turn into a dinosaur like it was nothing. Slippy is crazy, man. But anyway, let's get into a couple of Fire Emblem characters. A general sentiment within the Smash community is that Fire Emblem is a bit overrepresented in Smash, and we're gonna try to rectify that a bit here. First off, we're cutting Chrom and Roy. Starting with Chrom, I think that while his game is undoubtedly responsible for saving the entire Fire Emblem franchise, like that just isn't even up for debate, I feel like 3 representatives from that one game is a little excessive. We can keep Robin and Lucina, but let's cut Chrom and give his moveset to Lucina. Even though she took on the name Marth, she specifically says that she learned how to fight from her father, so I'd really like to see the moveset from Chrom and Roy continue on through her. Speaking of which, next up we have Roy, who just, he just really shouldn't be here. His game was fine, although it didn't sell that well, but holy cow, is Roy himself unremarkable. He's one of the most controversial protagonists in the entire Fire Emblem community, and when he's looked at outside of the context of Smash, a lot of his fiery personality and flair is totally removed. leaving us with somewhat of a bland 15-year-old boy who cares way more about scholarly studies than fighting. I know if you dig through all the support conversations and look at the interesting sides of him being a weak unit, you can start to piece together a compelling personality for him, but between who he is as a character and how his game did and what it means to Fire Emblem in general, or I guess what it doesn't mean, I just really feel like he can't justify his own inclusion. Moving on though, Mr. Game & Watch is a character I briefly considered, but I feel like his ability to represent an entire console more than makes up for the fact that he's not a real character himself. But as a side note, he should totally display the time on the console as one of his taunts. Meta Knight and Pit are also safe, but I'm gonna need to cut Dark Pit. If the Kid Icarus franchise continued to future games, we could probably justify a greater number of reps, but as is, he's just not gonna make the cut. Likewise, I'm cutting Zero Suit Samus because she reminds me that other M exists, and that makes me very sad. After that, we've got a stretch of a bunch of characters who are safe. Now, you may be tempted to cut Wii Fit Trainer, but looking at what Wii Fit has done for Nintendo and the Wii specifically, I think that's a really tough argument to make. Likewise, I thought about cutting Rosalina, but Mario Galaxy was just such a successful and wonderful game that I feel like her inclusion justifies itself. Bowser Jr., on the other hand, is taking her place in the Smash Bros. Guillotine. With our abundance of Mario characters, some of them have just gotta go, and I feel like he doesn't offer enough to stand on his own among the reduced cast of characters. Duck Hunt is also safe, as the game was monumental in Nintendo's history, but moving just past him to Ryu and Ken, one of them has gotta go, and it's a shame because I really do love Ken as a character, but I just don't think we need both him and Ryu here. If this was Chun-Li, it might be a different story, but for now, Ken has got to go. Right after him, Cloud is also safe, but shortly after that, we run into Corin, who I'm still not convinced is even a real character. But in all seriousness, her game did sell well, but with the success of 3 houses following it and the rough storytelling of the game, it leaves Fire Emblem Fates feeling like an ambitious but ultimately forgettable entry in the Fire Emblem franchise, especially when it comes to the grand scheme of things and how the franchise should be represented in a crossover. Likewise, Bayonetta is very, very cool, but I feel as though her game isn't really notable enough to justify her inclusion on our packed roster. Side note though, seriously, play Bayonetta because it's fantastic. Moving on, Inkling gets to stay, as does Ridley, but when we get to the Belmonts, I'm left feeling as though one of them needs to go. Simon was the star of the earliest Castlevania games, but Richter represents a big turning point for the franchise, and his game is a lot more fun, potentially because it reminds me a lot less of Ice Climber. I think between these two though, I'm gonna side with Richter, but I could be talked into going either way. King K. Rool and Isabelle are both safe, although my heart still hurts that we got Isabelle over KK Slider. Incineroar, however, has got to go. He's an incredibly fun character in Smash, but removed from that context, I feel as though he just doesn't have the staying power to be included here. And this brings us to our final stretch, our DLC. Piranha Plant, I love you, but you've gotta go. Joker also gets to stay, as recent studies have shown that Persona 5 is actually the only JRPG in existence, so it would be a crime to get rid of him. This brings us to Dragon Quest, and honestly, Hero should have been in here a decade ago. Dragon Quest is so huge in Japan that I'm honestly shocked that it took so long. Banjo Kazooie, on the other hand, is getting axed. Farewell, sweet prince. I don't like that line at all. Banjo Kazooie, on the other hand, is getting axed. Terry's safe, as well as Byleth, whose game is the best-selling strategy role-playing game of all time, but Min Min is getting the boot, as her game hasn't really been around long enough to establish itself within Nintendo's vast catalog of games. Steve and Alex get to stick around because of Minecraft's monumental cultural influence, and I also think that they might have the most musical parodies out of anyone on the roster, which, I mean, has gotta count for something. Sephiroth also gets to stay, but Pyra and Mithra are getting kicked out of our game. Kazuya represents one of the big 3 fighting games, so he gets to stick around, which brings us to our final DLC character, Sora, who I feel also has enough dominance within the cultural space of Japan and the United States to stick around. And there you go, that takes us through each character who I would cut based off the merits of each of their own games. I made a similar video to this a while back where I cut a fighter from each series, and I honestly have no clue what I said there, but I do know that my opinions of Smash characters have changed a lot since starting my Smash Bracket channel, so I'm gonna go check that out and post my thoughts on the list in a pinned comment. Let's see how my takes have changed. Anyway, see you there. Also, side note, check out my Smash Bracket channel because it is my baby and I love it.